In the debate about remigration, I think the mainstream view is that opinion will grow and grow that we need mass deportations, and then we will elect a hardline remigrating government, and that will go into action and remigrate millions or tens of millions of people. Now, my view is different. I think there is a little bit of debate as to how it will happen, but I think I am definitely in the minority. I would say my views are sometimes as welcome as a taxman's letter, as welcome as a hedgehog in a condom factory. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong. I still think I'm right. I don't think we're going to vote our way out of this. I think we're going to collapse our way out of this. Specifically, what I think is likely to happen is government finances will break down. That will mean government can no longer pay for the welfare state. That means the welfare state will break down. When the welfare state breaks down, we will cease to have any loyalty towards the state because we believe that we're all on the teat of the welfare state to one extent or another. We believe that the purpose of the state, the purpose of democracy, is to provide us with the economic management and the goods and services and free stuff that we want. And when that's no longer provided, we will see no reason to submit to state authority. It's a little bit like the old Soviet saying, which was, "We pretend to work and they pretend to pay us." Well, what we say now is they pretend to provide us with things and we pretend to respect them. And when the welfare state goes away, we will no longer respect them, and then the state will fall over because it will no longer have authority. And then I think we will find that we are living at the end of the age of the state. That's what I think we are headed for. When that happens, I think the populations will separate out hard along ethnic lines because we will only trust our safety to people who look, think, act, and speak like we do. Those are the people we're familiar with. Those are the people we can trust with our safety, to pool our safety and our protection and order with. And I think a lot of foreigner groups, invader groups, they will self-segregate into enclaves of their own, and I think they will suddenly find there's no more welfare and there's no contact with the British population. They're in areas that can't support themselves, don't have a productive base, don't have a source of civil society. A lot of them, those foreigner groups warring between themselves, conditions in those foreigner enclaves will plummet fast, and that is the point at which they will be amenable to a trip home, a free airplane ticket home. And that is not atrocity. That is simply allowing people to stew in their own juice. That is not genocide. That is not ethnic cleansing. That is letting people put themselves in conditions where they make the choice voluntarily to leave. I prefer that, and the reason I'm saying this is because I want to show how likely I think it is, and the reason I want to show that is because I think being wedded to the status system, the idea that you vote, we vote our way out of it, we vote a different government into place, and that government then does the remigrating for us. I think that view is dangerous. I don't think it's going to happen. And if it does, I think it would be very violent, it would be bloody, and it would fail. So I don't think we should go down that route. I think that the best way is to wait the short period of time for collapse. I think collapse is much more likely to happen anyway, because I think as long as the welfare state continues, we are going to accept the harm that governments are doing to us. We're going to accept the continued invasion because we want to survive. We put survival before civilization, and in a modern welfare, big state welfare state, survival means welfare and government management of the economy, healthcare, education, unemployment benefit, welfare benefits, and those are the things that's really what we expect from the state. And when those things are gone, all bets are off. That's when things changes. So I think we will collapse our way out of this. What I want to talk about, now here is why I think that collapse is likely. I want to talk about the precariousness of public finances, in particular, how we are, most of us, very dependent upon the state, and how tiny the real tax base is, i.e. the people who are making a net contribution or contributing as much as or more than they take out. So and how likely those people are to leave as well. And then I want to quickly try and rattle through fast some of the numbers showing how fast the black hole in government finances is going to grow. The 30 billion shortfall that Rachel Reeves is reported to be thinking about at the moment, that is nothing compared to what's coming. And there is no way to plug that gap except by trying to squeeze higher earners more. I hold no brief for the rich. I detest the English class system, but if you squeeze those rich people harder, they will go. They are more footloose. They are more, I think, probably more prone to a bit of self-pity. They're more likely to leave. And so there is no way out of this. Government finances can't deal with the situation. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to begin by looking at a video from Lotus Eaters because it caught my eye. I liked it. Now, this is the video here. It's well worth it. It's well worth a look. It's about 20 minutes long. We're in the death spiral. Basically, it's talking about the death spiral of public finances and welfare dependence. Now, I just want to play a quick clip, and then you'll get to the nub of it.
A record number of people, 54.2%, 36 million, now live in households which received more in benefits than they contributed in taxes. Now, what I will say is that this is just one study. There are other studies that give roughly different numbers, but they're roughly the same. It's there. Some studies show 53%, others 54%, but basically they're saying that last year, before Keir Starmer took over, it was somewhere like 52%. So it's hardly that he created it. The Tories definitely capitalized upon this, but he is accelerating it. And they're saying that roughly 36 million people live in households that are a net drain. And they receive more in benefits than they contribute in taxes, which raises the number of those who are raises the degree in which those who are economically productive and considerably need to help and pay taxes and help the rest.
Surely on the face of it, that's just completely unsustainable.
Yes.
Surely just at a glance, common sense says that's completely unsustainable.
It is completely unsustainable. And here we have the other problem.
I've come to really like those Lotus Eaters. They're sharp. They gave me a very nice interview. They're really nice to me when I visited them for an interview recently. And if you look at that little clip, look at the expression on Bo Dade's face. He doesn't need to know something to understand it. He immediately gets to the nub of it. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. That is unsustainable. That can't continue. That's what he's saying. And he's right. Having 54% of the population taking out more than they put in, that's a problem. But it is worse than that, a lot worse than that. If I go, I think this is the story that's being referred to here. That's the Sky News story. Record number of Britons receiving benefits that amount to more than they pay in tax. Study finds and analysis by Civitas of Office for National Statistics data 20 to 21 showed a record 54.2% of people now live in households which receive more in benefits than they contributed in taxes. Now that in turn that's the Civitas study here. I'll just hold on. I'll just show you the Civitas study, and that is an analysis of the effects of taxes and benefits on household income. And the figures there came from that ONS study, the effects of taxes and benefits on household income financial year ending 2024. Well, they do it every year. Okay, so this one was from 2023. So if I go down to the bottom, just bear with me a second. Now, what this study shows is that in fact it is twice as bad as Lotus Eaters reported it to be, and even they could see even then it was completely unsustainable. What it was talking about is welfare benefits coming in the door being more than 54% of households are paying out in tax. Now, those welfare benefits coming in the door, they were defined as benefits in kind. So there. Here, benefits in kind include the imputed value of NHS, state education, adult social care, school meals and healthy start vouchers, etc. So it's basically NHS, state education and adult social care. Now, if I go to that, this is from Where Does It All Go? That's a pie chart showing how tax gets spent. And what you'll see is welfare, NHS, education, and a little bit of adult social care there under local authorities. So if you look at that chart, you cut out the red bit and you shift the green bit over and a little bit of the brown bit over, that is almost dead on 50%. So what you're getting is 54% of households are paying less in tax than half of their share of what the government spends on their behalf. So basically, or to put it another way, 54% of households are paying less than half of what the state is spending on their behalf. So all these other things, the apparatus of the state, things you still need, things like defence, police, courts, local authorities, etc., or depreciation of assets. You don't need that, but that happens when you're running a state. It has assets; those assets go down in value. All those other things. I think there's a list of all the science, innovation, technology, environment, public corporations, justice, housing, foreign office, etc., etc. I mean, if you don't have an army, you get invaded, and it's miserable. But that is not counted as one of the benefits coming in the door for those people. So you're actually only looking at 50% of the tax contribution. So those people are paying less than 50% of break even for their tax contribution. So the way that was probably worked out is there's an exponential graph of what people pay in tax, and then the level was set there saying how much is coming through the door in benefits. Trace the line along, right? That's 54% of the population. If you put that line twice as high, then you take it along, it probably means that the number of contributing taxpayers is somewhere around 20%. So it's probably about 80% of the population are below that line, because most things do end up being about 80-20. Usually it's a bit shy of 80-20. It's probably somewhere between 75 and 80%. Then there's 5 or 10% who are just dead on the line, neither above it or occasionally above it, occasionally below it. And the ones who are actually making a consistent contribution are probably about maybe between 15 and 20%, probably roughly around about 15%. So that is basically the people who are tax contributors, most other people being a net drain. And that is a very small tax base. And that has two problems. It means what happens if they go. And the second thing it means is it gives us all the more incentive to vote for more tax and spend, because it's a rational economic consideration. We pay less than it's worth. So we put less than £1 in, get more than £1 out. And it means that we're going to be really reluctant to allow cuts in welfare. Any politician who wants to cut welfare will get thrown out of the window like a bucket of Tudor sewage. It is not going to be pretty. We will not put up with it. We saw it recently when government couldn't cut the winter heating fuel allowance. It couldn't cut the PIP that PIP allowance, and so you cannot cut welfare spending, because if that happens, then the whole deal becomes a bit less profitable for us, and we will dig our heels in on it. And that is at least partly the result of the fact that it's being paid for by such a small minority. Again, I hold no brief for the rich, and I don't like the English class system, but I'm just looking at the numbers here and the sustainability of government finances. And this is and the point I'm making here is that these studies, they're not facing up to the really bleak nature of the fiscal financial reality. Government doesn't want to show us. We don't want to be shown. We want things to continue. We want the system to stay up, to stay on its legs. We're not familiar with the idea that the state could collapse, that government finances could collapse, that the welfare state breaks down and collapses. We don't want that to happen. And as a result, we're just shy of looking. We don't dig out the facts and face up to how bad the situation is. And I think that is, you can see that in that report from Civitas, reported in Sky News, which seems to show that, it seems to say that only 54% of us are not paying our way in tax terms, when in fact it's much higher than that, around about the 80% mark, I would say, at a guess. And but you can see this also. I want now to move to another video. Again, a very good video, but by this is a fella I like. Now, if I just hold on. Now, if you, that fella, his name is Mark Simmons. Never met him, spoken to him, but I think he's very good. He's a right-wing detailer, he's a right-wing numbers man. And this video here for The Spectator is "The rich are leaving Britain and making you poorer." What he's basically saying is that you squeeze the rich harder, you tax them more, they will leave, and they are the big taxpayers. And there's been a debate about it where you've had people on the right saying you can't just keep taxing the rich more because they'll leave and then you reduce your tax take. And then people on the left saying, no, they're not leaving, it's not happening really. Rich people are happy to be taxed more, so let's tax them more, it's okay. And then he's coming back with, I think, pretty good evidence to show that the rich probably are leaving, probably, and it is because they're getting taxed more. And what I want to show you is what he's saying here. If I go back a bit, hold on. Now, there are 2 or 3 bits of evidence that he produces. This is the first one, where what he's talking about is the amount of income tax, the total income tax take that is paid by the top 1% of earners. And these numbers might surprise you. The top 1% of earners in 2022 paid about 31% of total income tax. And that's gone down to 24 to 25. Or for 25 to 26, that's predicted to be 26.6%. So that's gone down. And that isn't because taxes on the rich have gone down, they have gone up. Allowances have been reduced. What can it be? It must be in part because rich people, millionaires, are leaving. And I don't see how you can escape that conclusion from that point of view. I don't think rich people are suddenly saying, actually, I don't want to sell assets, I don't want to realise gains. I think that they're just getting out of the system, going abroad, ceasing to be domiciled in Britain. I think that's a fair conclusion from that. Now, the next one he talks about there is I'm not going to play this video. I'd encourage you to watch it because it is good. Again, well, it enhances my, by good, I mean it agrees with me, basically. It enhances my point that state finances are in a bad way. So this one here shows, like income tax, capital gains tax like income tax for the 1%, capital gains tax receipts are falling off. Capital gains tax is paid by the wealthy because it's a tax on gains that you get when you sell an asset. People who sell assets are the owners of assets, and the owners of assets are the rich. And so what you're seeing there is, again, since 2022, capital gains tax receipts have fallen off. Maybe it's because rich people are just not selling things, but I think it's, at least in part, it must be because they're going abroad and then selling them to realise they get their gains abroad. I think that's pretty good evidence. Now, what he then does is to look at how much tax is paid by a tiny minority of taxpayers. So he looks at the top 1%, going from 31% down, not 26.6, but 28%. The top 0.1% paying about 12.5% of all income tax revenue. I mean, these are really skewed numbers. It's a really disproportionate burden. And then the top 1 in 10,000, so the top 0.01% of taxpayers paying about between 5 and 6% of taxes. So 1/10,000th of the number of taxpayers pays about 5 to 6% of tax. And those guys are those are the ones who are really likely to leave. But if what he does here is to say that one of those top taxpayers, i.e. one of the 0.01% of taxpayers, pays tax equal to 1,300 average taxpayers. Now, again, I think he is wrong there. And this, again, is my point, that the situation is in fact much worse. What he's doing here is he's comparing the amount of tax paid by 0.01% of taxpayers and 1,300 average taxpayers. What he's not looking at is the net tax that they pay. So someone who is in the 0.01% of taxpayers, that guy, he even if he takes out as much welfare as the average taxpayer, then there's still a huge gap between what he pays in and what he takes out. But he probably doesn't take out that much in welfare, because the big welfare things, healthcare, well, he probably goes private because it's faster and he can get a better doctor because he pays a lot of money. As regards schooling, he's probably happy paying 25 grand a year, a term rather, 75 grand a year to send his child to a private school. And I doubt that if he wants adult social care, he just pays for it himself. So these things that were listed here, hold on, these things that were listed there. So welfare spending, no, he won't qualify for welfare, for unemployment benefit, and healthcare and education. No, he pays for those himself. So it's difficult to see what welfare he gets. So the net amount that he pays in tax, if you told me that was equal to 50 or 100,000 average taxpayers, I would believe you. It's probably even worse than that, because the average taxpayer probably pays a little bit less in tax than the state pays on his behalf. So there is no comparison there. So what I think you have is a very small amount. Let me just bring up that chart again. What you have is a very small tax base, probably, I would say in total around about 15% of taxpayers. In total, with income tax, the top 10%, the 10% highest earners, they pay about 60% or 61% of total income tax take. With national insurance, the top 10% pay, I think, 55 to 60% of national insurance payments. With VAT, which is the other big tax earner, the top 20% of the richest 20% pay about 50% of all VAT because they spend more money. So it is heavily skewed. Somewhere, I would say a bit north of 10%, between 10 and 20%. That's the real tax base, the ones who are contributing more than they take out. And those are the people you need to retain. Okay. Now, my point is that the thread I'm trying to trace is that it is worse than we are letting on to ourselves about. Government is not telling us, and we don't want to know. We don't want to face up to the prospect of the state collapsing. We particularly don't want to face up to the prospect of the welfare state collapsing. That is as welcome as a dog at a game of Skittles. All right. Now, and I think there's further evidence, a further indication that those higher taxpayers are probably leaving because of the increased number of people who are leaving. If you look at this story from Sky News, number of Britons leaving the UK higher than previously thought. If I go down to this table, more than 250,000 Britons emigrated from the UK in 2024, a rise of 180,000 from the old estimate. And so basically it was thought that 77,000 went, and in fact there was 257,000 left, and was thought that the numbers in return was 60,000, when in fact that was 143. So net, what you had was, instead of 17,000 leaving, you had 114,000 leaving. Now, I reckon probably a disproportionate number of the people leaving were white British, probably higher earners. A disproportionate number of the people returning were probably foreigners, invaders, because patterns of immigration tend to be actually very back and forth. People don't just emigrate and stay there. They emigrate and they go back to the old country. Then they change their minds or they go back and stay with family for a while, and then they come back. So those people returning, I suspect, are probably more made up of foreigners than the numbers leaving. And I reckon that it's more than 0.01% of those people leaving came from that 0.01% of highest taxpayers. So I reckon the disproportionately higher taxpayers leaving. I think that's a reasonable assumption there. Now, just by the way, this is presented by the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, as an improvement. No, having a lot of invaders, a lot of foreigners coming in, and a lot of white Brits leaving, that accelerates the invasion. That accelerates mass immigration, the change in the nature of the country. But it's presented as an improvement because if we are all interchangeable units, you only have to look at net migration. And so it's present, but it's not an improvement because because it accelerates our replacement, but also from the government's own selfish point of view, it reduces its ability to make ends meet because the people leaving are more likely to be higher earners. This is what the rich tend to be like. Rich people, in my experience, tend to have very healthy egos. They tend to have a high opinion of themselves. And as a result of that, they tend to be much more self-pitying and they're much more likely to say, I'm not welcome here. I'm being treated as a tax mule. I'm going to go. And they will say, I'm being made to feel as welcome as a porcupine at a nudist colony. I don't like that. Poor me. I'm going to go. I'm going to go to a country that does appreciate me. I'm sick of being slagged off and not thanked. And so the rich are likely to go. I think that is in part a problem with inequality, but we're stuck with it at the moment. So and that is just the financial situation that we're facing. And I think the rich are more likely to go. Your ordinary guy who works in a care home or in a call centre, he doesn't have the spare money to be able to, it's really much more difficult for him to emigrate and to have the freedom and the flexibility in his life to be able to do it. And perhaps the skills to offer and the money to offer, it's difficult for him. Someone like Tony Blair or Rishi Sunak, when they hop over to LA or New York and then back to London, they probably don't even think of it as migrating. They just think of it as travelling from one home to another. But for the ordinary battler, it's a lot tougher than that. So I think it is those rich, one of the points I'm making is that the tax base is very small. That makes the financial situation precarious, like an upside down pyramid. That's the analogy that is used. I think it's a good analogy. And I think that pyramid is starting to wobble because the richer people, they are going and they will continue to go. I think that will accelerate because I don't think they'll see it getting better for themselves. They'll only see it getting worse. And part of the reason it's going to get worse is because government finances are themselves getting worse and worse and worse in a big way. Again, we are not totting up these numbers. We're not adding them up. We're not seeing how big the financial black hole is. Rachel Reeves is said to be wrestling with a 30 billion black hole. It's going to get much bigger than that fast. And who are they going to tax? Well, they're going to have to tax the people who pay the most tax, and that they're going to try and squeeze the rich people. They've shown that. They're not going to go for ordinary working people, which is people who earn 45,000 or less. They're going to go for people who earn more than that. And those people, a lot of them will go. So what I want to look at is the speed with which the black hole in public finance is growing. So if I look at this one, that's from the Health Foundation, the NHS maintenance backlog, rising costs and failing investment. So what's the black hole within the NHS? Key points. The maintenance backlog more than doubled in real terms between 15 and 16, 6.4 billion, and 23-24, 13.8 billion, with the fastest growth in the highest risk category, urgent repairs to prevent catastrophic failure or disruption to clinical services. Now, what has happened? What governments have done is, in order to keep paying the money out to us, they have sort of put off dealing with maintenance costs, capital costs, just so they can keep us happy with the flow of money and the flow of free stuff. But that catches up with you because eventually you don't repair hospitals, you have to close wards, and then waiting lists grow, and then we get angry and we want to throw the politicians out of the window. And they don't want to be thrown out of the window. They think they're better than a bucket of Tudor sewage. They want to stay on the gravy train. And so how are they going to get that money from? Where are they going to get 13.8 billion from? Just add that up. And it's not just the health service. If you look at that one, this one is the National Audit Office. Government building maintenance backlog is at least 49 billion, Spending Watchdog says. Maintenance backlogs across the key public services, including hospitals, schools and prisons, are estimated to be at least 49 billion. Poor government data means the true cost cannot be estimated, but is likely to be higher. Then it says under that, poor condition affects public service delivery, with 5,400 clinical service incidents occurring in the NHS every year due to property and infrastructure failures. That is a lot of clinical service incidents in the NHS. And if they don't want more of them, they're going to have to spend that money to repair the buildings. And where's it going to come from? Okay, so that's the NHS. What's the next one where there's a black hole? Yep, the state pension. You just see that line going up and up and up. That's going to continue going up and up and up due to the triple lot, which basically means that the old age pension goes up higher than people's earnings after a while. And the next one here, this is not the state pension, this is public sector pensions. These are contractual benefits. Again, this is the government putting things off onto the never, never. It says to public service workers, we're not going to pay you very much, but you get a big fat gold-plated pension at the end of it. And this is a story from the Telegraph. Public sector pensions albatross hits 5.8 trillion. And that's from a fella called Neil Record, a former Bank of England economist, has calculated that public sector workers will have built up 5.8 trillion in total pension promises by the end of 2025 to 26, so equivalent to twice the national debt. What that means is by that date, the total amount that they're going to be committed to paying, the government will be committed to paying out over the next 50, 100 years will be 5.8 trillion. Some economists say if you reduce that to a capital sum now, that's worth about 1.3, maybe 1.5 trillion pounds now in order to be able to pay it off. What the government says is it doesn't matter, we just pay out the money to pensioners hand to mouth as we go. So we pay it as we go. There's no capital sum, there's no fund. The problem with that is that's fine when the sailing is smooth. When you start hitting the rocks, lenders, banks, financial institutions, people who buy government bonds, what they say is, you're broke, and by the way, we haven't looked at all the other ways that you're broke, all these other liabilities that you've incurred, and now we're going to take them into account. You've got this huge, great pension liability, and that would come out at 5.8 trillion. So you're even more broke. We're not going to lend you any more money. And then your borrowing costs go up and up and up. Okay, the next one is local authority debt. Councils warn of, this is the County Councils Network. They might have an incentive to say this, but what they're warning of is financial catastrophe in 12 months' time with unmanageable SEND deficits risking bankruptcy. So at the same time, SEND deficits, that's special educational needs, which have been, that's young people's social care as opposed to adult social care, have been kept off councils' books due to the statutory override, have ballooned in tandem with increased demand and are set to more than double in just a 24-month period. These deficits were estimated to be 2.5 billion nationwide last March by the Association of Local Authorities, etc., and are in line to rise to 5.9 billion, so that's about 3.5 billion increase, by the time the override runs out in March 2026. So March 2026, that special educational needs bill hits the books and it will be 5.9 billion, 3.5 billion more than was expected. Add that 5.9 billion to the black hole in government finances. But it gets worse for local authorities. This is from the Daily Mail. At least 59 councils face total collapse from SEND costs, town halls staggering under unimaginable 18 billion debt after explosion in autism and ADHD diagnosis but outcomes are not improving, i.e. they're not getting any more money. So if I show you that chart, at least 59 councils could go bankrupt overnight when deficits of around 18 billion are formally announced to their books according to the county councils network, the previous people I just showed you. Now there's the number, that's 17.8 billion, that's nearly 18 billion, that's 28, 29. So in about 3 years' time, that's going to hit. So add that, I think you can add that now to the black hole in government finances, because that is soon going to hit us. And lenders will anticipate that. They will see that coming. So what does government do? Does it bail out local authorities? Does it say, here's 18 billion to bail you out? Or does it let local authorities go broke and then go in and take them over? At which point it is then going to have to effectively pay off those debts, because if it doesn't, you will have angry voters on your hands ready to throw politicians out of the window, which politicians don't want done to them. All right, the next little bit of the black hole is the disability costs. The UK faces hard choices over soaring disability costs. Annual spending on incapacity and disability benefits already exceeds the country's defence budget. The defence budget is 60 billion a year and is set to top 100 billion pounds by 2030, according to official forecasts, up from 65 billion pounds now. So that's a 35 billion pounds per year rise over the next 5 years. So over the next 5 years, it's going to rise by 7 billion every year, roughly. So 7 billion a year. Add that to the government's, the black hole in government finances. The problem is the government can't reduce that element of disability payments, that element of the welfare bill. It tried to in a very small way with PIP payments. There was a storm of protest. You saw some really ugly hysterics in the House of Commons over it. It was really, really degrading. A lot of the female MPs really sort of just showing their inability to control their tempers over it, really, thinking that's a virtue. And the result was the government just couldn't push it through, and so it couldn't cut that welfare bill, couldn't do it, really begin to cut it. So it's not going to be able to cut it now. So that 7 billion a year rise and rise and rise, 7 billion a year step up, I think that is going to continue. And that is a big increase. And here's a relatively small increase. This is from Shelter. The bill for homeless accommodation soars by 25% in a year, hitting 2.8 billion. So that is a 25% increase in the year 24 to 25. That is a fast increase. 2.8 billion, well, that's small fry compared to the other bills, but that's still a lot of money. It sounds like a lot of money to me anyway. Oh, and another one, that's defence. Government are going to have to increase defence spending. Currently, defence spending at 60 billion is about 2% of GDP. They're going to increase it to 2.5%. If you see there, 2.5% of GDP from April 2027, so in about 18 months' time. And then in the next Parliament, so after 2029, up to 3%. So in 18 months' time, that 0.5% increase, that's another 15 billion added on the bill, 15 billion added to the black hole. Tot all these numbers up together. I reckon you're getting up to 100 billion on the black hole in the next few years. And then after 2029, if that goes up to 3%, that's another 30 billion a year. Where does that money come from? It will come from taxing the biggest tax mules. That's the rich. They're going to leave. Finally, there is debt interest. We all love debt interest. I hear differing figures. One is 102.5 billion, one is 120 billion. The figure that I think is most accurate is about 105 billion that the government pays in debt interest. And they're saying it's going to go down a bit before it goes up. I don't think it's going to go down that much at all. Very little, in fact. But if you look at this chart, that's debt interest payments. Let me go to the next one that shows that enlarges that picture. Now, what that shows, the blue line shows what the proportion of government revenue is that is being spent purely on debt interest. So this huge debt that's been accumulated by government has to pay interest on every year, mainly to foreign investors, by the way. So you can't sort of negotiate with them. and it might, well, some of it will be denominated in foreign currency, but that is about as high as it's been. So about between 8 and 10%. I think nearer 10% than 8% of government revenue is being paid in debt interest. Now, and that's with an interest rate of 4%. Now, the last time where it got up to 10% was when interest rates were at 10, or actually they got up to 11.5%, but around about the 10% mark. If interest rates today go up to 10%, that means they go up 2.5 times. That means debt interest goes up 2.5 times. So instead of being 105 billion a year, it'll be in the region of about 260, between 260 265 billion a year. I mean, that's meltdown territory. There's nothing. You just have you give up. You close half your hospitals when that happens. You just can't afford it. Now, what I want to look at here is this is I think a good interview with a numbers man, a former government numbers man. This fella is hold on, he's this guy here from the Daily Telegraph, public sector pensions albatross. That fella, the fellow who was talking about it being 5.8 trillion, that was Neil Record. He was a Bank of England advisor. He then went off to make money on the markets in currency trading or something that I don't understand to do with currency. And what he's doing is delving into the detail here. I want to play a short clip from this. He, because he's a numbers man, I like it because it means he gets to grips with the numbers, and it means he looks into the black hole, which most of us won't do, and he sees how bad it is. But he does get a bit lost in the weeds. So I'll just play a short clip and try and simplify it. Okay.
I've actually just been re-looking at the interest cost that we're paying. So the government claims we pay 120 billion a year in interest, which is, by the way, a record. But it's wrong. We don't pay 120, we pay just under 170 billion. Because, and this is again all part of this is government sort of constantly twisting and turning to keep the population unfamiliar with what's going on. The rules require that if you have a funded...
Okay, I've stopped it there because he gets a bit confusing there. He gets a bit lost in the weeds. But there are 2 points he's making. Firstly, what he's saying is that, in fact, government admits to having to pay 120 billion every year in interest rates. That's a figure I've heard bandied about quite a lot. It could be true. What he's saying is, in fact, it's really 170 billion because of there's a rule which says that unfunded public sector pensions, if they're unfunded, so if they haven't put the money aside to be able to pay all those payments out in the future, they have to account for it as if they're borrowing the sum of money that they should have put in, and they have to account for it as if they're paying interest on it. And it's an accounting exercise. I don't think any money changes hands, but it's one that government is supposed to show on its books. It doesn't, because it says, oh, it's just a paper transaction. It's just something that's done for the purposes of good accounting. But that is the sort of thing that lenders pick up on when it's no longer smooth sailing, when you get close to the rocks and they start saying, what other liabilities have you got? I see you've got this accounting mechanism where your public sector pensions are supposed to pay interest on money that they have had to borrow or are supposed to borrow in order to make up their fund. Well, we're going to consider that now because we think you're broke. We think you're even more broke than we thought you were. And so then government goes broke slowly, then fast, then very fast. That's the first thing. And he talks about that being meltdown territory. And the second thing, and this is a thread that I see, where he talks about government, if you heard in there, twisting and turning in order to keep people unfamiliar with the reality of the situation, with the reality of government finances. Yes, they're doing that, trying to hide it, trying to keep things off the books and then not report it, because they don't want us to know how bad things are. They don't want us to know how weak their position is, and we don't want to know it either. We're reluctant to hear how bad it is, and I think that means the carry-home message from that is that the system, well, this is the point I was making about Lotus Eaters. I mean, really good, sharp guys. I really enjoyed doing my interview with them. They were so nice to me, and they're really, really smart fellas. But I don't think they have underestimated the nature of the problem by a factor of 50%. So it's twice as bad, as they were saying. And also, this fella here who works for the Spectator, if I just bring up his picture, because I recommend that you look at that guy, Michael Simmons. But again, I think he underestimates how skewed our reliance on a very small minority of taxpayers is. And I think that this is really because we're unfamiliar with the idea of the state and state finances and the welfare state breaking down. We don't really want to get to grips with these unattractive, unfamiliar ideas. If you doubt me on that, just look below at how low the number of people who watch my videos are. I don't think that's just because I'm an obnoxious guy. I think that is because what I'm saying is not what people want to hear. We want to hear that with the system as it is, what we're familiar with, can work. We just change our minds, vote in a different government, and it works for us. We don't want to hear that we're going to collapse our way out of it. It is scary. I find it scary, and I go on about it all the time. So I think most people just find it, they just don't want to think about it. And so we are kind of comfortable not really delving, not really peering into the black hole, because it really is dark jet black when you look at it. It is not good. Government finances. Again, as I say, I reckon that over the next few years, what the government is going to have to do is to start to make good on a black hole that's at least 100 billion. And that is, they're not going to be able to do that. Now, the reason I'm going on about that is because I think our public finances, they are the first domino that falls in the process of the sequence of events that leads us to collapse our way out of the problems we're in. I don't think we're going to vote our way out of it. I've had this debate with Steve Laws. The reason I mention him is because he's so popular and he does such good work. His view, he's really doing a lot, he and many others are doing a lot to shift the window of acceptable opinion. But their view is opinion is changing, therefore we will get new policies in place and the government will remigrate people. I don't think that is going to happen. I think collapse is much more likely. I think as long as the welfare state stands up, most of us voters, we will keep voting for the system and the treachery within the system as it is. We're not going to change it very much. We might demand some window dressing. We'll be satisfied with that, but I don't think it's going to change. I think it's much more likely that the system is going to collapse. And that's what I've tried to show here, how close to collapse it is, how precarious it is. And if I'm right on that, what we will then see is government finances collapsing, the welfare state then collapsing, that leading to loss of confidence and loss of obedience to the state authority then collapsing, and then populations separating out hard along ethnic lines. And as long as we can preserve law on our side, we can remain orderly and prosperous and self-disciplined. And then I think it will be quite easy to simply let those foreigner invader populations in their enclaves stew in their own juice as conditions become unlivable, and then they become amenable to accepting a free airplane ticket back and doing it effectively, voluntarily, consensually. I think that is much better than the strong-arm tactics of the state doing it at the point of a gun against people who say no. That could get bloody. I don't want to see that. I don't want to take part in that. So, but I don't think it'll be necessary. And that's why I think it's important to point out how likely collapse of the system is. And that's what I hope I pointed out here, that it is a lot more closer to collapse than a lot of people, including numbers guys on the right, people who dig into the facts and figures, realise. And so it's not to depress you, it is to say that that is how we are eventually going to put things right, and it is likely to happen. So get ready for that collapse. Don't be scared by it, though. It will happen, but it will seem like that's when we have lost, but that will be when we start to win. Thank you very much.